I'm really pleased to hook up with her again after our marvellous Christmas breaks. She is Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome, Isabel.
Oh, good evening. We're at quite an exciting point, aren't we, in terms of what actually happens politically regarding these calls for a public inquiry into the grooming gangs. Very, very difficult position that Labour has boxed itself into. I was hearing earlier today that the kind of mood music from the Labour leadership was softening quite considerably, and I wonder whether some kind of compromise was going to be reached, and perhaps we'll get an update actually while we're on air.
Yes, we're waiting for the result of the vote on the inquiry, which I'm assuming Labour will win because of its vast majority. But yes, you're right. Jess Phillips earlier, the Home Office minister who had been blocking this inquiry, seemed to have softened her tone and said it may be possible that there might be an inquiry. I personally have some sympathy with those who say an inquiry is not the thing. Because inquiries don't seem to achieve very much, ever. They kick the can down the road. Now, when Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir, says what people want is action, I kind of agree with that. But what does he mean by that? Now, this is the action that I would accept instead of an inquiry. And by the way, I'm all in favour of an inquiry if that's what people want. But this is the action I would accept. There are thousands of girls out there, young, innocent victims of these rape gangs, thousands of them, 1,400 in Rotherham alone. These people are called witnesses. They know who did what to them. They know the police officers, the social workers, the counsellors, the local authorities who did nothing, who turned away and let their ordeal continue. They know who these people are. So the action I would accept would be immediately these people, these coppers, the people who did nothing, who turned their backs, are identified and we begin prosecutions against them. I'd accept that. Would you?
I would most certainly love to see that, and I would add, I would also like to see the deportation of anyone who was responsible, culpable, and is a citizen of another country. And of course, we're primarily talking, although not exclusively, about Pakistan here. And I know you mentioned in your introduction that absolutely outrageous...
Yeah, we're going to go into that in just a second.
We'll come to that. So yeah. I want to see deportation, and I want to see people being shamed. I was watching a clip earlier today of a Labour figure called Ian Austin, at that time an MP, interviewing one of the senior police officers who presided over some of this appalling set of allegations. And he was questioned about why his officers actually turned on a 12-year-old girl rather than her assailants, and removed her from a premises from being drunk and disorderly, rather than asking why she was surrounded by leering men who were abusing her. I mean, time and again, authorities failed. And whilst I do agree with you about public inquiries, in general, I hate the things. You know, they go on years and years. They cost the taxpayer multi-millions. And by the time you actually get the report, people have sort of forgotten what the original thing was, or the children have grown up. It's all too late. So the basis on which I think we should have an inquiry would be that it can only take a year, and that multiple investigations operate in parallel.
Good idea. Yeah. Give it a time limit. Now, but as I say, what we're really talking about, either really definitive, decisive action immediately, catch the people who let this happen, who turned their backs immediately, or an inquiry. But what we're talking about, by the way, they have, of course, they've just heard they voted no against an inquiry, but I don't think that necessarily means we won't get one in the end. But what we're talking about here, Isabel, and it's very, very important, we're talking about justice for the thousands of young girls who were abused in this disgraceful way, the thousands of young girls who were abandoned by the authorities, who were allowed to be raped, to be sexually abused, to be treated like animals, frankly, to be tortured. They deserve justice. And if that does come in the form of a public inquiry, that's fine by me. I'd just as soon see all the culprits who let it happen. I'd like to see them getting their colour felt as well. Let's talk. We'll get back to the general issues in just a little while. But let's talk about this case. I broke this story last night because the Times, the early editions, broke around about 9:30 last night, and I read it out immediately, but let's put some flesh on the bones, as it were. This is the case. He's a former cab driver and a Muslim preacher. He's a Muslim preacher called Qari Abdul Rauf. He's 55 now. He was the boss of, there he is, he was the boss of a gang of 9 Asian men, Pakistani origin, convicted of sex offences against vulnerable girls in 2012, including, in his case, the rape and trafficking of a 15-year-old girl who he had sex with and then shared her with his mates. He got 6 years and was released in 2014, of course, after just 2.5 years, typical. But he was released after 2.5 years in 2014. He was told immediately, you will be sent back to your native Pakistan. 2 tribunal judges rejected his appeals against deportation in 2020 and 2022. In the 2022 hearing, so that's only 2 years ago, the judges ruled there was, and I quote, a very strong public interest case, close quotes, for removing him from this country. But his lawyers successfully argued that he couldn't be left stateless. And also, our old friends from the European Court of Human Rights came on in and said he had a right to a family life. As a result of this, this monster, this sex fiend, this paedophile rapist walks the streets of Rochdale, a free man among his victims. I cannot think of a more damning indictment of modern Britain than that. Can you?
It raises so many issues, doesn't it? First of all, I believe that there should be a minimum tariff for violent or sexual abuse of children. You know, far too often we're seeing paedophiles get away without even a custodial sentence. And frankly, that sentence of whatever it was you said, 6 years.
6 years, he did 2.5.
Serving 2.5 is derisory and an incredible insult to his child victims. I mean, 15 is a child. You know, I have a daughter who's just turned 14. These are little people. They really are. And there is no way that what happened can be described as consensual. And time and again, the perpetrators of these evil crimes tried to pretend that the little ones that they abused in some way consented to the activity. Well, that just should have been rejected outright as any kind of defence. So, yes, we should have a minimum tariff for these types of offences. As for people's human rights to a family life, when they commit offences against children and women, those should automatically be negated. And thirdly, we get to our judges, and you and I have talked about this before. I'm afraid they're part of the problem. They just don't seem to be able to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly right. And this, the fear in the case of this guy, this excuse for a human being, is that there may be other. Well, it is almost certain there are others like this. People, Pakistanis, who were living here, who should have been deported, but were allowed to stay. And that's half the problem. Well, that's one of the essential problems of the situation right now. It is well known that the perpetrators, these gang rapists, many of them served their sentences, weren't deported, and now walk the streets among their victims. And that is an absolute disgrace.